For the next reading section, we'll cover Chapter 2, Shape and Form. Again, please follow along with the reading guide that I've created and the video. So again, follow along while I read to you. Shape and form. The key vocab that we're looking for is shape, form, geometric shape, organic shape, static, and dynamic. When a line curves around and crosses itself or intersects other lines to enclose a space, it creates a shape. Similar to a silhouette or an outline, a shape is a two-dimensional, that means flat. It has height and width, but no depth. It has one boundary in a single surface. Again, a shape is area. Okay, so if you're finding the area of something, it would be like a square or a circle. We can easily identify many objects from guitars to light bulbs by the shape alone. The word form describes something with three dimensions: length, width, and depth. Again, form means that it has volume. So if a shape is a square, a form is a cube. Forms usually have weight and solidity. I'm already messing up. Sorry, guys. They may have only one continuous surface like a ping pong ball, or they may have many surfaces like a fish tank or a pine cone. Sculptors, architects, and product designers generally work with forms. Again, three-dimensional. They create solid structures which have actual volume. Cartoonists, painters, photographers, and collage artists, on the other hand, usually work in two dimensions. So that's a flat image on paper, even when they are depicting forms. When an artist paints an apple, for example, he or she may use the apple's shape and add shading to create the illusion of three-dimensionality or form. But the image itself only has two dimensions. So again, when we're doing things like perspective, like 2-point or 1-point perspective, or creating value to make something look curved on a flat surface, we're actually creating an illusion. Categories of shapes. Artists and designers use various types of shapes and forms to create their finished products. In this chapter, you will explore these types and how they affect you as both artist and viewer. Although the following sections often refer specifically to shapes, in most cases, the information may be applied to both shapes and forms. Geometric and organic shapes. Shapes fit easily into two basic categories: geometric and organic. Geometric shapes are precise and sharply defined. Again, most of the time, we have a name that we know for a geometric shape. So, for example, if I said a square, everyone knows what a square is. That is a geometric shape. Many of them are easy to recognize, such as circles, squares, and triangles. We often see such shapes in architecture. Also, many manufactured and handmade products are based on geometric shapes. Nature shows us some geometric shapes and forms too. Honeybees make combs whose cells are in the shape of a hexagon, and an orange resembles the form of a sphere. Although you may recognize certain geometric shapes in nature, most natural objects have organic shapes. Now, organic is a word that I'm sure you have heard before. Organic shapes reflect the free-flowing aspect of growth. They are often curved or rounded and appear in a variety of informal and irregular shapes. The form of a pear is organic. So too is the shape of a maple leaf or my hand. So organic doesn't typically have a defined name. So if I say a hexagon is a defined shape. It is a certain number. But if I say a leaf, that doesn't necessarily, there are lots of different types of leaves for one thing, but it doesn't have a specific number of points or things like that. So again, it's a little less defined. Look at the geometric and organic shapes and forms on these pages. Do you see obvious differences and similarities? So again, we'll just look at some of the work down here. So again, we have basic shapes like geometrics, as well as organics where they curve. So this is definitely going to be, these are forms again, because we can actually see that they have depth. But here we're talking about geometrics. Here we have organic, okay? Curved and angular shapes. Geometric and organic shapes may be either curved or angular. Shapes that are curved are graceful, and because the eye rapidly sweeps along them without interruption, they tend to imply movement. Okay, principle of design right there, movement. So that could be that they imply that they are moving or that they move our eye. Angular shapes, on the other hand, are straight-edged. They suggest strength and regularity. When you look at angular shapes, your eyes move along the shape and stop momentarily where one shape connects with another. These meetings or opposing shapes may add a sense of tension to a design. If an angular shape, for instance, leans to one side, it might suggest movement. Compare the sculptures. So again, here we're looking at the sense of curve. And as we learned, if you've already watched the line topic, we've talked about how the types of lines can mean different things or give us a sense of different things. So in this case, we have a curving shape or form. And in this case, it still is going to give us more of a pleasant softness to it versus the angular area of these tree trunks. They almost look like some squids. Although both sculptures convey motion, Tucker's sculpture shows opposing thrusts of horizontal, vertical, and angular forms. Okay, moving on. Actually, sorry, this one's Tucker's. So here again, we have the movement. You can kind of feel this is going to move your eye. This also moves or has a feeling that it's like falling. The angles create a falling motion. But again, where we see movement here is very graceful. Where we see it here is almost like it's crashing. Positive and negative shapes. Every design, whether it is a painting, sculpture, building, or photograph, is made of positive and negative shapes. Positive shapes are the tangible, actual aspects of a design. In painting or drawing, they often represent solid forms, such as a bowl of fruit in a still life. In sculpture, the positive shapes are the solid forms of the sculpture itself. So again, we have talked about positive and negative before. So if I put my hand here, my hand is the positive space. The area around my hand, the white paper, is the negative space. We can't really have one without the other. The negative defines the positive. It assists. Negative shapes are the areas that either surround the positive shapes or exist between them. In a still life painting, they are the spaces around the bowl of fruit, between fruit forms, or in the background. In sculpture, the negative shapes are the empty spaces around and between the solid forms. Positive and negative shapes are equally important. A successful design is one that carefully balances both. Look at the pre-Columbian pendant figure. Notice that the artist placed two curved openings above the figure's arms. These negative shapes echo both the curves of the figure's headdress above and those of the blade below. Together, the positive and negative shapes create a unified whole. So that's this one. So again, the black in here is the negative space, the gold is the positive. Sculptures and silhouettes present a strong contrast between positive and negative shapes. And we've talked about this with space. Sometimes, however, an artist prefers to blur the boundaries between them. Study Plus Reversed by Richard, I'm not sure how to say it, I'm sorry. Can you tell which shapes are positive and which are negative? So when we're looking at this, it almost, let's see if I can focus that a little better. It almost becomes like an MC Escher, if you've ever seen an MC Escher work, where the positive kind of becomes the negative. So for example, if I drew a bunch of arrows pointing one direction, they actually create arrows going the other way. It's an optical illusion you may have seen. Qualities of shape. Shapes and forms also have different qualities. To understand a shape's quality or appearance, you can use your senses. Your sense of sight can tell you if a shape is pleasing to look at. Use of several senses together can also give you information. Touch and sight will tell you about a form's surface and weight. Through sight, touch, taste, and even hearing its crunch, you know that an apple is hard and crisp. Being aware of appearances, such as perceived weight, surface quality, and position, will help you portray shapes and forms convincingly in your designs. So again, the goal of the artist on a two-dimensional surface, especially, is kind of to create an illusion. So we're creating the illusion when we talk about the quality of shape, about something like texture. Does it look soft? Does it look smooth or heavy? So again, those are things that we are creating. Light and heavy shapes. There's a striking difference in the perceived weight of a cloud and that of a boulder. To draw or construct shapes effectively, an artist must understand how to convey qualities such as lightness and heaviness. Soft, floating clouds usually require a lighter touch, with a subtle blending or blurring of edges. Rocks and boulders, on the other hand, demand a strong, hard quality. Look at the landscape painting by Thomas More. Notice how Moran depicted the sky, the mountains, and the mist of falling water. Each is distinct and recognizable. So again, here we can see both soft shapes where they're blurred for the misting water. We can see blurred shapes along the horizon, but up here close where we see these very dark, heavier lines, and I know it's hard to see with the glare, but they are much heavier, darker, bolder, and they give it more weight. Smooth and textured shapes. Another important quality of shape is its surface. Is the surface flat or reflective like a pane of glass, or is it rough and pitted like tree bark? Your eyes and fingers move easily across the smooth surface of glass, sanded wood, polished metal, and plastic. The speed of your observation is slowed by a textured surface, such as an intricately knitted sweater or the shell of a turtle. Light strongly affects the surface qualities of a shape. A smooth surface reflects light easily, and the reflections can be very bright. A heavily textured surface tends to absorb light, thereby reflecting far less. Notice the difference between the smooth and textured surfaces. So 2, 3, right there. By emphasizing surface qualities, artists can create shapes and forms that are both interesting and lifelike. Pay attention to surface quality. Doing so can help you appreciate the unique and the not so unique in nature, in art, and in everyday objects. So again, when we see something, our brain tells us if it is smooth or rough based on our previous experience with items. So when we see something like this and it looks like a stainless steel, our brain already tells us that this is a soft object. Now, when we see something like this is a really contrasting like kind of thing here, because our brain is used to fur on a cup with a spoon and a saucer. This is very contrasting with our brain, because our brain says that none of this is correct. Okay, some of you might even see that and think like, oh, it's so gross, because it implies this texture that really shouldn't be there, this contrasting texture. Static and dynamic shapes. The position of a shape or form is important and might suggest rest or stability, or a feeling of energy and movement. Shapes that are in either a vertical or horizontal position will appear to be standing still or resting. These shapes are static. Leaning or diagonal shapes suggest falling, running, or climbing. The shapes appear to be active or dynamic. Dynamic shapes are associated with change or movement. So again, here we see the acrobats. Their shape appears to be in movement. They are not static, they are dynamic. An artist may use static shapes to produce a peaceful landscape design. For example, a combination of vertical trees and a horizontal stream can imply quiet and calm. But static shapes can also be used to convey permanence and power. So again, if you think about like mountains or trees, okay, those are shapes that we might see, or forms. And again, they are static and they give a sense of permanence, or buildings, skyscrapers. The static shapes of this ancient temple display a sense of solidarity and immovability. Such constructions announce to all that the great pharaohs who built them were to be obeyed and respected. And that's the picture that's over here. So again, large scale, large heavy weight of static appears to be permanent. Okay, it's a permanence. To achieve a more active feeling, an artist must turn to more dynamic shapes. Notice the curved and fluid shapes in Charles Demuth's Three Acrobats. It's this one. The shapes produce an atmosphere of movement and change. The figures seem to be whirling across the paper. Soft watercolors and light pencil lines underneath add to the airiness of design. So it's a very light design because of the way the color and line are applied. Form and light. Both artificial and natural light have an enormous effect on shapes and forms. Bright sunlight, for instance, can create dark shadows and glaring highlights. But as the sun sets or goes behind a cloud, crisp, well-defined landforms change to dark, flat shapes. A great contrast in the light is also noticeable in the soft light of sunrise and the dazzling light of noon. The angle of the light also helps define the forms we see. An overhead source of light usually creates shorter shadows and can make the surface textures indistinct. A source of light from one side will lengthen and distort the shadows, calling attention to details of surface texture. So if you've ever played around with a light, or if you've sat around a campfire and told like scary stories, we would go with a light from below. So when humans see light from below, it typically can create more of a menacing look, because again, if light is coming from below, it's more than likely something that we derived from being, outside, living outside at nighttime around a fire. It would have been a more dangerous time in the night. Again, when we see typically something lit from straight above, it doesn't give us as much of a menacing design. It gives more of a pleasant design because it's a natural light, like it's sunlight, sunny. On rounder curved forms, light creates gradual changes in shadows. Usually, the brightest and darkest areas are separated from one another by many gradations of light. On angular or sharp-edged forms, however, the changes can be sudden, so that's high contrast. The brightest highlights may appear right next to the darkest shadows. These changes from light to dark are discussed more in Chapter 3.